Improved blood pressure, cholesterol, inflammation, and skin health. Can we attribute all these benefits to one tiny seed? Yes, we can. Tune in to find out more, only here on the People Scientist podcast. You are listening to the People Scientist, the podcast dedicated to helping us optimize our health with the latest scientific findings on neuroscience, physiology, and nutrition. I, your host, Dr. Stephanie Caligiuri, a nutritionist, physiologist, and neuroscientist, will be here with you every single week, bringing us information to ignite our thinking, to help us be one step closer to the healthiest we can be. Hello, my People Scientist Army, and welcome back to the People Scientist podcast, where every week I arm us with some scientific information so we can all lead the healthy lives we want to live. How is your day going today? I hope it is going really well and that I can add a little bit of sunshine to your day. If you are tuning in for the first time, then welcome to the People Scientist Army. My name is Stephanie, and every week I talk about topics to which I have expertise. For example, I have a bachelor and master's degree in human nutritional sciences, a PhD in physiology, and a postdoctoral fellowship in neuroscience. So that is why I like to speak about our body, our brain, and the foods we eat. Today is a special milestone episode because it is episode 75. I did add something new to the description box to this episode, and that is a link where if you want to buy me a coffee as a thank you for the episodes, you can now do so. I strongly believe that education and knowledge should be free and accessible to everyone. And so I also choose not to take any sponsorship so that you know I am not being influenced by any companies. So I do the podcast just for fun and because I care about all of you and your well-being, and I want to share truthful science with all of you so that we can lead the healthy lives we want to live. So the podcast will always remain free and available to everyone. But if by chance you feel a little extra generous, maybe you'll feel like buying me a coffee, and I thank you for that. But back to our milestone episode 75 today. I thought I would do something a little special and cover some of my own published research. During my PhD, I conducted a few clinical trials in patients with high blood pressure or heart disease, and our goal was to see if a simple nutrition intervention could benefit their health and risk for heart attack or stroke. That simple intervention was a tiny seed called flaxseed. So for today's episode, I'm going to take you through some of my findings and the potential health benefits of this tiny seed. So as we always do, let's start off with some core takeaways. Flaxseed is a tiny brown seed, or golden seed, that contains many healthful components such as antioxidants, fiber, and omega-3 fatty acids. Flaxseed is best consumed when ground or milled, as our body has a hard time digesting the seeds whole. In our clinical trials, we provided 30 grams or 3 heaping tablespoons of ground flaxseed every day, either as short as 30 days or as long as a 1-year clinical trial. The flaxseed was provided on its own most of the time or incorporated into some snack bars, muffins, or bagels. Eating 30 grams of ground flaxseed resulted in some benefits. For example, improvements were seen in risk factors for heart attack and stroke, like improvements in blood pressure, cholesterol, and inflammation. We also noted some benefits to molecules that circulate around in the blood that are implicated in skin health and other health conditions. So ground flaxseed may be added to a healthy diet to potentially impart some benefit to heart health, brain health, skin health, and more. So now let's get into those details. Flaxseed is a tiny seed that is grown in all continents around the world, except for Antarctica. But in truth, not much grows in Antarctica. So flaxseed, therefore, is widely accessible. And it is interesting to us as nutritionists because flaxseed contains a lot of healthful components and in an unusually high amount too. For example, flaxseed is very rich in fiber, both insoluble fiber that adds bulk to our stool in order to prevent constipation, and flaxseed also contains soluble fiber that is thought to absorb cholesterol and other potentially harmful compounds in order to remove them from our body. Flaxseed is also very rich in lignin antioxidants, such as secoisolariciresinol diglucoside, or abbreviated SDG. Flaxseed is also one of the highest sources of the omega-3 fatty acid alpha-linolenic acid. In 30 grams or 3 tablespoons of ground flaxseed, there is 6 grams of this omega-3 fatty acid, so that's quite a bit. So, as scientists, we were interested in this seed as it appears to be a simple food that could easily increase the nutritional quality of our diet. We in particular became interested in flaxseed for patients that were at risk for heart disease, as previous clinical trials have concluded that a good source of fiber, omega-3 fatty acids, and antioxidants may impart some benefit against heart disease risk factors. So my lab published a study in 2008 in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition, and this study aimed to see if eating flaxseed could increase these healthful components in the blood and body. So they had compared whole flaxseed with ground or milled flaxseed and flaxseed oil. Now keep in mind that flaxseed oil will contain the healthful omega-3 fatty acids, and if the flaxseed oil is purchased as unfiltered, it may also contain some of the antioxidant SDG lignans. But flaxseed oil will not contain the fiber. So we wanted to compare the whole seed versus ground seed versus flaxseed oil in regard to the omega-3 levels in the patient's blood. It turns out that the whole flax seeds did not result in any increase of omega-3s in the blood, nor the antioxidants. But the ground or milled flaxseed and the flaxseed oil did significantly increase the circulating omega-3 fatty acids in the blood. So it was based on this study that we concluded whole flax seeds don't seem to be very bioavailable. They seem to just pass through the individual's body without the nutritional components being absorbed. So that's why we were mostly interested in ground or milled flaxseed. So we started to look at the effects of flaxseed on blood pressure. Now, high blood pressure is called the silent killer because it is the number one risk factor associated with death in the world. Often people are completely unaware if they have high blood pressure. I conducted a trial in which I went to workplaces and public events to measure the blood pressure of over 1,000 people. And in the American Journal of Hypertension, I published the results. Shockingly, 2% of individuals had emergency hypertension that required immediate medical attention. Every single time someone had the emergency hypertension, they were completely unaware. Their blood pressure was greater than 180 over 110, and often some other signs such as feeling anxious or agitated, having a nosebleed, chest pain, or abnormal sensations. And it is important that I say that the emergency hypertension levels were not isolated to just the elderly. I observed this in people of all ages. The reason why high blood pressure is so dangerous is because it puts our organs at risk for damage, because it means that too much pressure is being put on our organs, leading to that cell damage. Particularly, our brain is very susceptible. As such, the biggest risk factor for stroke is high blood pressure. However, I learned very quickly that people did not take their blood pressure medications regularly. Often when I would measure the blood pressure of someone and I told them their blood pressure was high, they said, "I know, but I don't really take my blood pressure medications anymore." And I can understand that there were many reasons why they didn't. For example, cost, if it was too expensive. They didn't like the side effects of the medication. They felt guilty that they had to rely on a medicine or a pharmaceutical. Or sometimes they just forgot. When I asked people if they would prefer to control their blood pressure via a nutritional approach, there was a resounding yes. People desired this. So as a result, I conducted a couple different clinical trials to see if flaxseed could impart some health benefits. So we published in 2014 in the journal Hypertension a clinical trial in which we recruited a group of 110 participants that were living with peripheral artery disease and high blood pressure. Now, individuals with peripheral artery disease are at a very high risk for stroke. Now, a stroke occurs in the brain, and around 85% of strokes are classified as ischemic strokes, meaning there is an atherosclerotic plaque or clogged blood vessel in the brain. And part of the brain, as a result, does not get blood and nutrients, so part of the brain may become damaged. That's an ischemic stroke. So controlling our blood pressure is essential to reduce our risk of stroke. So we conducted a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled clinical trial in which half the participants received 30 grams of ground flaxseed alone or incorporated into a variety of foods daily for 1 year. The control group received the same foods, but with no flaxseed for 1 year. Now, I want to point out that a nutrition clinical trial to last 1 year is very unique and very powerful. Often, nutrition clinical trials do not go for this long, as nutrition trials are very expensive because you have to provide food to the participants for this length of time. This is part of the reason why nutrition clinical trials are less common than drug or pharmaceutical clinical trials. Unfortunately, there is not much profit in food, and the trials are more expensive to conduct. Nevertheless, after 6 months and after 1 year of consuming ground flaxseed, the participants saw a very significant improvement in their blood pressure. The improvements in their blood pressure were equivalent to that of blood pressure medications. The patients saw an improvement in their systolic blood pressure, that top number on our blood pressure reading, by 10 millimeters of mercury, and an improvement in their diastolic blood pressure, that bottom number, by 7 millimeters of mercury. Now, if participants had higher systolic blood pressure, above 140 millimeters of mercury at the beginning or baseline of the clinical trial, they exhibited an even greater benefit of 15 millimeters of mercury. This in itself was a great finding. However, many people wanted to know how this was possible. Well, after we performed several analyses on the blood of the patients, we realized that certain molecules called oxylipins had changed significantly with eating flaxseed. Now, oxylipins that are known to constrict our blood vessels and that increase inflammation had decreased in those who ate flaxseed. So flaxseed reduced these detrimental or negative oxylipins. In fact, we noted that stroke was associated with these certain oxylipins in the blood that are known to constrict blood vessels and therefore are implicated in stroke incidence or progression. Flaxseed reduced these oxylipins. In addition, we conducted another clinical trial in participants with no chronic disease. We had one group of younger individuals that were aged 19 to 28 years old, and another group that was aged 45 to 64 years old. Now, we measured the oxylipins in their blood before at baseline and after 30 days of eating ground flaxseed. At baseline, the older adults had significantly more pro-inflammatory and blood vessel constricting oxylipins circulating around in their blood. This could potentially cause an increase in the risk for heart attack and stroke. However, after eating 30 grams of ground flaxseed every day, the oxylipin blood profile of the older adults became very similar to the younger adults. Specifically, the levels of those pro-inflammatory and blood vessel constricting oxylipins reduced. The younger individuals also saw some reductions in these oxylipins too, so both the older and younger adults saw some potential benefits to their oxylipin profile. And therefore, we could insinuate that perhaps ground flaxseed may impart some benefit against inflammation and heart attack and stroke risk. In the Journal of Nutrition in 2015, we noted that ground flaxseed lowered LDL cholesterol in patients with peripheral artery disease by 15%. If patients were already taking medications for their high cholesterol, adding ground flaxseed to their medications lowered their LDL cholesterol by 8.5%. These are great improvements, and therefore flaxseed would be thought to reduce the risk for heart attack and stroke because it reduced the two biggest risk factors, which is high blood pressure and high cholesterol. But besides heart health, Does flaxseed have an impact on other measures of our health? Well, a few clinical trials indicate that flaxseed and its antioxidant lignan content may impart some benefit against breast cancer risk factors. This was reviewed in 2018 in the Frontiers in Nutrition. For example, after reporting the frequency of foods consumed by a cohort of individuals, it was realized that women who ate more flaxseed in their diet tended to be at a lower risk for breast cancer. Now, this was just an association, though, so the next step would be to look at an intervention clinical trial. And indeed, there was a randomized controlled, double-blinded controlled clinical trial to see if eating flaxseed every day for 5 weeks would reduce risk factors for breast cancer in women undergoing surgery for breast cancer removal. The women who ate flaxseed every day for 5 weeks on average had a decrease in tumor cell proliferation, a reduction in the expression of HER2, an oncogene associated with the development and progression of breast cancer, and an increase in cell apoptosis in their breast biopsy. The scientists concluded that flaxseed had the potential of reducing tumor growth in patients with this type of cancer. It is thought it could be in part due to the impact of the lignans and their potential low estrogenic activity. However, more research in this area is needed, as only a few trials have been conducted. Flaxseed, because it is a great source of omega fatty acids, may also impart some benefit to skin health. One of the first signs of omega fatty acid deficiency is seen on our skin. Our skin may appear very dry, inflamed, and have low elasticity. In scenarios of omega fatty acid deficiency, if sources of omega fatty acids like flaxseed are added to the diet, improvements in skin health and skin appearance are seen. Okay, so now that we have covered that flaxseed might have some health benefits, how might we add this to our daily routine? Well, the amount eaten in most clinical trials was 30 grams, which is about 3 heaping tablespoons. And I would suggest to consume the flaxseed ground or milled so that our body can absorb the nutrients. Now, you can purchase flaxseed already ground or milled, or you can buy the seeds whole and grind it yourself. For example, I've added whole flax seeds to a coffee grinder and ground the flax seeds that way. Once the flaxseed is ground, or when you've purchased it ground, I would store it in the fridge or freezer so that the healthful components can remain stable and not break down. Particularly, the omega-3 fatty acids tend to be very prone to temperature and warm temperatures, and keeping it in the fridge or freezer is just an added measure to make sure that those nutrients remain stable. Now, how do I eat it? Well, many people like to add flaxseed to their smoothies, salads, yogurt, on top of pastas or chilies, for example, really add it on top of sweet or savory dishes. Now, ideally, I suggest that we don't overcook the flaxseed, as it could degrade the omega-3 fatty acids in it. However, in our clinical trials, we did add ground flaxseed to granola bars, muffins, and bagels. It appears that if the flaxseed is incorporated into a batter and baked for a short period of time, that the nutrients are relatively stable. However, cooking flaxseed at a high heat, not in a batter, like for example as a breaded coating on meat, and frying it, this would not be ideal, as the flaxseed is directly exposed to the high heat, and as a result, the healthy components in the flaxseed are more likely to degrade in this scenario. Now, some people have asked about flaxseed oil. Now, flaxseed oil may have some benefits as well, but the flaxseed themselves contain more of the healthful components like the lignans and fiber. If you purchase flaxseed oil, I would suggest to purchase it cold pressed and unfiltered, as the flaxseed oil omega fatty acids will be more stable if it's cold pressed, and if it's unfiltered, then it will have some of those antioxidant lignans, which is good. Also, once you've purchased the flaxseed oil, make sure to store it in your fridge so again it can remain stable for longer. If you find that eating flaxseed every day is a little bit difficult, you could switch to doing flaxseed on some days and flaxseed oil on some other days for some variability. I would also suggest to add the flaxseed to your diet quite slowly, because 30 grams can be quite a bit for people. And in these clinical trials, we often started the participants with 10 grams a day for a week, and then 20 grams a day for a week, and then 30 grams on the third week. because some people are not able to handle that much fiber. And so I would suggest the same for all of you, to start slowly, to start with 1 tablespoon a day, for example, and see how your body handles it and see if you can increase it from there. So that is a wrap, my People Scientist Army. Our special 75th episode was based on some of my own research on this tiny seed called flaxseed. I think flaxseed can be part of a very healthy diet because it is rich in fiber, omega-3 fatty acids, and the antioxidant lignan SDG. It appears that flaxseed may help achieve healthy blood pressure and healthy blood cholesterol levels. Flaxseed reduced molecules in the blood that are able to increase blood vessel constriction and inflammation. Thereby, it's thought that flaxseed may be able to reduce the risk of stroke and heart attack. Flaxseed may impart some benefit to breast cancer risk and skin health as well. Now make sure that your flaxseed is ground or milled and store it in your fridge or freezer. Make sure to follow me on social media where I post the papers and studies that I refer to in each episode. I also like to add in some extra tidbits of information on the week's topic on my social media account, so make sure to follow me there. You can find my handles and my donation link if you want to buy me a coffee in the description box to this episode. Stay tuned for my October episodes because I'm very excited to bring you some spooky topics that I've got lined up for you. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I look forward to meeting you all back here next week, the same time and same place on the People Scientist podcast. Bye for now. I am a scientist simply sharing scientific evidence. Some of the clinical interventions I discuss are not appropriate for everyone. Before making any changes to your diet or lifestyle, please do consult the advice of your physician or dietitian. My opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect those of Mount Sinai Hospital and its affiliates.